thy tabret. Now, for those of you who don't know what a tabret is, it is a tambourine. And of thy pipes. Now, the word here is a bezel, which is a socket for gems. Okay? So, the workmanship of thy tabrets and of thy pipes was prepared in thee in the day that thou wast created. So it's teaching us whoever this is that it's referring to is definitely a created being. Okay? Verse 14. Thou art the anointed cherub that covereth. Hold up now. Hold up. Thou art the anointed. Now, whenever something says or uses the word anointed, whatever it is that's being anointed, especially if it's a person, we consider to be Moshiach. Think about that. But then it said the anointed cherub or cherubim in most of your Bibles. That covering. So keep that in mind. We're going to interject some passages here to find out where we're coming from. So in Genesis, we want to look at that one first because that is where we are introduced to cherubim, or the cherubim. Genesis chapter 3, verse 24 says, so he drove out the man, and he placed at the east of the Garden of Eden cherubim, or cherubim, and a flaming sword which turned every way to keep the way of the tree of life. Now, the way that the Hebrew is, in Ezekiel 28:14, when he uses the term cherub or cherub, that's singular. But whenever we see used in the Hebrew cherubim or cherubim, that's plural. Okay, keep that in mind. Let's go to Exodus now because we're introduced to the cherubim in Genesis 3:24. But we don't hear anything else about cherubim till we get to Exodus 25 and verse 18. And again, this is a passage for those of you who are not familiar with it. We are getting the instructions on how to build the tabernacle. So in Exodus 25 verse 18 it states, and thou shalt make 2 cherubim of gold, of beaten work shalt thou make them in the 2 ends of the mercy seat, or the covering. And make 1 cherub on the one end, and the other cherub on the other end, even of the covering shall ye make the cherubim on the 2 ends thereof. And the cherubim shall stretch forth their wings on high, covering the cover, or covering the mercy seat with their wings, and their faces shall look one to another. Toward the mercy seat shall the faces of the cherubim be. And thou shalt put the mercy seat above upon the ark, and in the ark thou shalt put the testimony that I shall give thee. And there I will meet with thee, and I will commune with thee from above the mercy seat, from between the 2 cherubim which are upon the ark of the testimony, of all things which I will give thee in commandment unto the sons of Israel. Now think about this. If I can just demonstrate momentarily so we can get the idea. On one end of the covenant, you had cherub with his arms out this way. On the other end, you had another angel and his arms were out this way. So what you have the covering effect. It's important that we understand that because when we go back to Ezekiel 28:14, it says, thou art the anointed cherub that covereth. So what we're learning here, we're getting an idea of who this king of Zoar not so much was, because the king of Zoar was a physical ruler. But what we're learning is something else. But let's continue. Let's move on. Continuing It says, thou art the anointed cherub that covered, verse 14. And I have set thee so. Thou wast upon the holy mountain of Elohim. Thou hast walked up and down in the midst of the stones of fire. Now that's another point we want to really get into. So we make the comparison, Exodus chapter 30 and verse 1, which reads, and thou shalt make an altar to burn incense upon, of shittim wood shalt thou make it. Now think about that. First, we have the fact that he's covered in stones, similar to the high priest. Next, we have the mention of a cherub, which is in a position, a close position to where the Creator said he's going to speak from. Now we're having the connection with the stones of fire, or the altar of incense. What are we learning about this particular being, this entity? This cherub was responsible for leading the worship of Yahweh. Is that not what we're being taught? Otherwise, why were tabrets or tambourine a part of his makeup? Let's move on. In verse 15 it says, thou wast perfect in thy ways from the day that thou wast created till iniquity was found in thee. What does that teach? What does that mean? So we're going to move. We're going to come back to Ezekiel chapter 28. We're going to pick up where we left off. But we want to interject here something that was shown to Ishayahu, the prophet Isaiah. So let's go to Isaiah chapter 14 and let's begin in verse 3, which reads, and it shall come to pass in the day that Yahweh shall give thee rest from thy sorrow, and from thy fear, and from the hard bondage wherein thou wast made to serve, that thou shalt take up this proverb against the king of Babylon. Keep that in mind. Just like it started off talking about a physical king in Ezekiel chapter 28, it starts out talking about a physical king in Isaiah 14. Again, thou shalt take up this proverb against the king of Babylon, and say, how hath the oppressor ceased? The golden city ceased. Okay, and this is again similar to what we read in Yechezkel or Ezekiel. All right. Now it says, thy pomp is brought down to the grave, and the noise of thy viols. The worm is spread under thee, and the worms cover thee. How art thou fallen from heaven? Hold up, hold up, hold up. Is this saying that the king of Babylon was in heaven? Or is this saying something else? Before we get any further, I'm going to stop right there. Let me interject another passage. Now, this comes from another letter, or the same letter, written by Brother Shaul, or Brother Paul, to the assembly in Ephesus. So we go into the 6th chapter of Ephesians, verse 12. And he writes, this also is a testimony of what Brother Shaul understood pertaining to that word. So it says, for we wrestle not against flesh and blood. In other words, see, nation rising against nation, kingdom rising against kingdom. We are not one another.